The massive alien ship hung in the sky above New York City like a dark cloud. It had appeared 3 days ago, causing panic at first, then a strange calm as the world realized the visitors weren't immediately hostile. Captain James Walker stood on the rooftop of the United Nations building, squinting up at the metallic hull that reflected the morning sun. His uniform felt too tight around his neck. "It's time," said General Mills, checking his watch. "Their ambassador will arrive in 5 minutes." Walker nodded, his hand instinctively touching the pistol at his side. Not that it would do much good if things went bad. The aliens had technology far beyond Earth's understanding. A beam of blue light shot down from the ship, touching the landing pad. The light widened, and within it appeared a tall, gray-skinned being with 4 arms and large black eyes. The alien wore what looked like armor made of flowing metal. "I am Gray, ambassador of the Vorn Collective," the alien said, its voice surprisingly clear English. "We come to establish relations with your world." Walker stepped forward as practiced. "I am Captain James Walker of the United Earth Defense Force. Welcome to Earth." The meeting moved inside where world leaders waited. Gray explained that the Vorn had been watching Earth for decades. They had faster-than-light travel, energy shields, and weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. "We offer protection and guidance to developing worlds," Gray said, a strange smile on its face. "Your civilization shows promise, though you are still quite primitive." The UN Secretary-General thanked the alien for the offer, but explained that Earth would need time to consider. Gray seemed amused by this. "Of course, perhaps a demonstration of our capabilities would help your decision." Later that day, at a military testing ground outside the city, both human and Vorn representatives gathered. Walker watched as Gray inspected the lineup of Earth's most advanced weapons: fighter jets, tanks, and missile systems. "Interesting," Gray said, running a long finger along the barrel of a tank. "You still use chemical explosives and metal projectiles. How quaint." Walker felt his cheeks grow hot. "These weapons have served us well." Gray made a sound like laughter. "Please, demonstrate." The tank fired at a target a mile away, destroying it in a blast of fire and smoke. Fighter jets screamed overhead, dropping precision bombs. The military had brought out their best equipment to impress the aliens. When the demonstration ended, Gray seemed unimpressed. "Now, allow us to show you true weaponry." A small drone descended from the Vorn ship. Gray touched a device on his wrist, and the drone fired a beam of purple energy at a mountain in the distance. The entire mountainside disintegrated, leaving nothing but a smooth crater. "That was less than 1% of what one of our small ships can do," Gray said casually. "Your most powerful weapons would not even penetrate our basic shields." Walker noticed the alien's posture, overconfident, dismissive. He'd seen that look before in human opponents who underestimated their enemy. It rarely ended well for them. As they walked back to the vehicles, Gray placed one of his 4 hands on Walker's shoulder. "Your species has potential, Captain. Under our protection, you might advance quite rapidly. Of course, we would require certain resources in exchange." "What kind of resources?" Walker asked, already suspecting the answer. "Nothing you can't spare. Water, minerals, some biological samples." Gray's black eyes revealed nothing, and certain territorial considerations. That night, Walker sat in a secure room with General Mills and other military leaders. "They don't want allies," he said firmly. "They want subjects." "Agreed," said Mills. "But did you see their technology? We can't fight that." Walker thought about Gray's dismissive inspection of human weapons, the casual way he called them primitive. "Maybe we don't have to match their technology," he said slowly. "Maybe we just need to surprise them." As the meeting continued into the night, none of them noticed the small Vorn probe hovering outside the window, recording everything. Walker sat across from General Mills in the underground bunker known as Earth Command. Maps and screens covered the walls, showing Vorn ships positioning themselves across the solar system. More had arrived in the 3 days since first contact. They're setting up outposts on Mars, and our moon without even asking," Mills said, pointing to red dots on the display. "Some protection they're offering." Walker nodded grimly. "Permission to activate Protocol Underdog, sir." Mills looked at him for a long moment, then pressed his palm against a scanner. "Permission granted. God help us all." Alarms didn't sound. No dramatic announcements were made. Instead, coded messages went out to military bases around the world. In secret facilities, the equipment was prepared. Scientists were called in from vacations, all while diplomatic meetings with the Vorn continued on the surface. Dr. Thomas Reed hadn't slept in 36 hours. His lab beneath the Rocky Mountains was filled with strange equipment and half-finished devices. He looked up as Walker entered. "Captain, please tell me the aliens are friendly and I can go back to my boring research," Reed said, rubbing his tired eyes. Walker shook his head. "They think we're cave people with sticks, Doctor. We need your sticks to surprise them." Reed pointed to a large device in the center of the lab. "This might help. It's an electromagnetic pulse generator, but I've modified it based on readings from the Vorn ship. Their shields seem to block physical objects and energy weapons, but they might not be prepared for an old-fashioned EMP blast." "Will it work?" Walker asked. "Maybe. Probably not. I don't know," Reed admitted. "But it's better than nothing." While Reed and his team worked on weapons, Walker attended another meeting with Gray. The alien ambassador seemed different today. Less patient, more direct. "Your leaders delay too much," Gray said as they walked through the UN garden. "My superiors grow impatient. Earth has resources we need." "We're still discussing the terms," Walker replied carefully. "Some are concerned about giving up territory." Gray stopped walking. "The terms are not negotiable, Captain Walker. The Vorn Collective has designated Earth as a Class 3 development zone. You will provide resources and accept guidance. And if we refuse..." The alien's four hands opened in what might have been a shrug. "History shows that primitive species who resist advancement often damage themselves in the process. We would hate to see Earth damage itself." That night, a small Vorn ship descended on the Arctic without warning. It began drilling into the ice, setting up what looked like mining equipment. General Mills called Walker immediately. "They're not even pretending anymore. They're taking what they want." "Have you contacted Gray?" Walker asked. "He says it's a scientific outpost, and we shouldn't worry about it. Says the ice caps are melting anyway, so we clearly don't value them." Walker looked at the satellite images of the Vorn ship. "Let's send them a message. Is Reed's device ready for testing?" An hour later, a seemingly ordinary military plane flew over the Arctic. The Vorn ship noticed it, but didn't react. Human aircraft were no threat to their shields. The plane dropped a single package that fell toward the ice below the alien ship. In his command center, Walker watched the live feed. "Activate it, Doctor." Reed pressed a button. The package didn't explode, at least not in any visible way. But suddenly, the lights on the Vorn ship flickered and died. The vessel tilted to one side, its anti-gravity systems failing. On the radio, they could hear the Vorn crew's confusion. "Shields at full power but systems failing. Unknown interference." Walker smiled for the first time in days. "Send the message now." The radio operator spoke clearly. "Vorn vessel, this is Earth Command. You are trespassing. Leave immediately or be destroyed." The damaged Vorn ship managed to lift off, limping back to space. Within the hour, Ambassador Gray demanded an emergency meeting. Earth had thrown the first punch. Walker knew what would come next. Gray stormed into the meeting room with all four arms gesturing wildly. His normally smooth gray skin had patches of dark color, which Walker guessed was the alien version of angry flushing. "Your attack on our research vessel was unprovoked," Gray said, towering over the human representatives. "Explain yourselves." General Mills stepped forward. "It wasn't an attack. It was a warning. You placed that ship in our territory without permission." "Permission." Gray made a sound like steam escaping a kettle. Advanced species don't need permission from developing ones. It's like asking a child if you can use their backyard. Walker watched the exchange carefully. The test in the Arctic had worked better than expected. Reed's device had somehow bypassed the Vorn shields, something the aliens clearly hadn't thought possible. "We're not children," Walker said, standing up. "And Earth isn't your backyard." Gray turned to him, black eyes narrowing. "What you did was impossible. Our shields stop all known weapons." "Guess you don't know all weapons," Walker replied. The meeting ended with threats from Gray about serious consequences for Earth's defiance. As the alien left, Walker noticed something new in the ambassador's manner, a hint of uncertainty. Back at Reed's lab, the success of the Arctic test had energized the team. Scientists worked around the clock, studying data from the encounter and building new devices. The EMP worked because their shields are designed to stop physical objects and energy weapons, Reed explained, showing Walker a diagram. But they don't block electromagnetic pulses, probably because they don't consider them weapons. "Can you make more? Bigger ones?" Walker asked. Reed nodded, "Already working on it. But they'll adapt quickly. We need more tricks." 3 days passed. Vorn ships positioned themselves around Earth, floating menacingly over major cities. No attacks yet, but the message was clear. Then reports came in from space monitoring stations. The Vorn were building something in orbit around the moon. Massive structures taking shape, pointing toward Earth. Weapon platforms, Mills concluded during the emergency meeting. "They're preparing to attack." Walker nodded. "Time to show them our next surprise." The plan was risky. A small team led by Walker would take a modified space shuttle to one of the smaller Vorn ships. Reed had developed a new device, a sound-based weapon that created vibrations at frequencies that might disrupt Vorn technology. As the shuttle approached the Vorn vessel, alarms blared. The alien ship fired warning shots that the small human craft barely avoided. "They're hailing us," said Jones, the pilot. Walker took the radio. "Vorn vessel, this is Captain Walker of Earth. We request to speak with your commander." The Vorn response came quickly: "Return to Earth or be destroyed. Human." Walker looked at his team and nodded. "Now." Reed's device activated, sending invisible waves toward the Vorn ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the alien vessel's lights flickered, just like in the Arctic. But this time, the ship's weapons also fired randomly, shooting into empty space. "It's working," shouted Reed over the comm. "The vibrations are confusing their targeting systems." Walker ordered the shuttle closer. The Vorn ship, now partially disabled, couldn't stop them from attaching a larger version of Reed's EMP device to their hull. As the shuttle retreated to safe distance, Walker gave the command to activate it. The pulse spread through the Vorn ship, shutting down systems across the vessel. The massive alien craft drifted helplessly in space. Earth's message was broadcast on all frequencies, meant for all Vorn ships to hear. "This is what primitive weapons can do. Leave our solar system or face destruction." Within an hour, Ambassador Gray demanded another emergency meeting. But this time, when the alien entered the room, his posture was different. The overconfidence was gone, replaced by something Walker recognized immediately: fear. The Vorn were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. Gray's meeting with Earth's leaders was short and tense. The Vorn ambassador made threats, but they sounded hollow now. As he left, he pointed a long finger at Walker. "You have no idea what you've started, Captain. The full might of the Vorn fleet will descend upon your world." Walker didn't blink. "We'll be waiting." 3 days later, the waiting ended. The morning sky filled with hundreds of Vorn ships, far more than anyone had expected. They appeared suddenly, using some kind of jump technology that Earth's scientists didn't understand. They're positioning over every major city, Mills reported, looking at the global map now covered with red dots. "This isn't a warning anymore. This is invasion." The first attacks came without warning. Beams of energy shot down from Vorn ships, destroying military bases and defense installations. Fighter jets scrambled but were easily shot down. Tanks and artillery fired back, but couldn't penetrate the alien shields. In Earth Command, alarms blared as reports of destruction poured in from around the world. Walker watched grimly as the casualty numbers climbed. "We need to deploy the EMP weapons," he urged Mills. The general shook his head. "They're not working anymore. The Vorn adapted their shields after the last attack. Reed says they're now blocking electromagnetic pulses." Walker slammed his fist on the table. "Then we need something new. Where's Reed?" The scientist was in his lab, surrounded by broken equipment and failed prototypes. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, his hands shaking slightly. "They've adapted faster than I expected," Reed admitted when Walker entered. "The Vorn are learning." "So must we," Walker said. "What else can we try?" Reed pointed to a large screen showing Vorn shield frequencies. "Their shields are energy-based, designed to stop energy weapons, and now EMPs too. But they still have to let light through to see, and they still need to interact with the physical world." "Meaning?" "Meaning maybe we can't beat their technology with our technology," Reed said, a new energy in his voice. "But we can beat it with simple physics." Walker didn't fully understand the plan at first. It seemed too simple. But as Reed explained, a smile spread across his face. "It's so primitive they'd never expect it," Walker said. 2 hours later, as Vorn ships continued their attack on Earth's cities, a series of seemingly ordinary communication satellites changed position. They had been in orbit for years, predating the Vorn arrival. The aliens had scanned them and dismissed them as harmless. They were wrong. At Walker's command, the satellites opened to reveal their true purpose. Each contained hundreds of tungsten rods, simple metal cylinders with no explosives, no complex technology, just mass and potential energy. The rods dropped from orbit, accelerating in Earth's gravity. By the time they reached the Vorn ships, they were traveling at over 8,000 miles per hour. Pure kinetic energy. The first rod struck a Vorn ship over London. It punched through the energy shield like it wasn't there, ripping through the alien vessel's hull. The ship exploded in a ball of fire visible from the ground. Similar scenes played out across the globe as more rods fell. Vorn ships, for all their advanced technology, couldn't stop simple objects moving at high speed. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, were useless against kinetic impacts. In his flagship above New York, the Vorn commander watched in disbelief as his fleet was decimated by what appeared to be metal sticks. "Impossible," he hissed. "Their weapons are primitive." In Earth Command, Walker watched the same scene with grim satisfaction. Sometimes primitive works just fine. But the victory was short-lived. Nearly half the Vorn fleet had been destroyed, but the remaining ships changed tactics. They moved higher, out of range of the kinetic weapons, and began a new kind of attack. The sky turned red as the Vorn deployed atmospheric charges, superheating the air above major cities. Temperatures rose to dangerous levels. This wasn't about destroying military targets anymore. The Vorn were making Earth itself uninhabitable. "They're going to cook us alive," Mills said, wiping sweat from his brow as the bunker's temperature climbed. Walker looked at Reed. "Please tell me you have more primitive ideas." The scientist's face was grim but determined. "As a matter of fact, I do." Reed led Walker through the lab's lowest level to a heavily locked door. The heat was becoming unbearable, even this far underground. Sweat soaked through their clothes as Reed punched in a long code. "I've been working on this in secret," Reed explained as the door swung open. "Wasn't sure it would work. And to be honest, I was afraid of what would happen if it did." Inside the room sat a strange device, shaped like a sphere with dozens of antennas ticking out in all directions. It hummed with power, making the hair on Walker's arms stand up. "What is it?" Walker asked, keeping his distance. "Weather manipulation," Reed said simply. "The Vorn are heating our atmosphere. This reverses the process." Walker looked skeptical. We can control weather now. Not exactly, but we can influence it. This device creates a chain reaction in cloud formation. If we deploy enough of them, we can trigger massive storm systems. Reed wiped sweat from his forehead. Storm clouds will block the heat and provide cover for our next move. Within hours, smaller versions of Reed's device were transported to key locations around the world. As they activated, dark clouds began forming at an unnatural speed. The temperature dropped as massive thunderheads blocked the Vorn's atmospheric heating. The aliens responded by moving their ships lower, trying to burn through the cloud cover. It was exactly what Walker had hoped for. Phase 2, he ordered. Across the globe, in seemingly abandoned facilities, massive rail guns powered up. These weapons had been deemed too impractical for modern warfare years ago. Too much power required, too difficult to aim. But against targets as big as Vorn ships, precision wasn't necessary. The first rail gun fired from a hidden base in the Rocky Mountains. The projectile, a simple aluminum slug, shot out at 15 times the speed of sound. It hit a Vorn ship before the aliens could detect it was coming, tearing through both shields and hull like paper. More rail guns fired. More ships fell. The Vorn fleet scattered, moving higher again, beyond the rail gun's effective range. In Earth Command, cheers erupted as the attack succeeded, but Walker didn't join in. They'll adapt again. We need to end this now. He turned to Reed. Is the main device ready? Reed nodded grimly. Ready, but untested. And if it works, there's no going back. The main device was a larger version of Reed's weather manipulator, modified to affect not just Earth's atmosphere, but the gravity field around it. The theory was simple but frightening. Create a temporary gravity anomaly that would disrupt the Vorn ship's propulsion systems. The risk is that we don't know what it will do to our own planet, Reed warned as they prepared the device. We could trigger earthquakes, tidal waves. Walker looked at the monitors showing cities burning under Vorn attack. We're out of options. Doctor, do it. Reed activated the device. For several seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then the entire bunker shook. Lights flickered. Equipment crashed to the floor. Is that the device or the Vorn? Walker shouted over the noise. Reed checked his readings. The device. It's working. Above, the remaining Vorn ships suddenly lost stability. They tilted and spun, their anti-gravity systems failing as Earth's gravity field fluctuated wildly. Some ships crashed into each other. Others fell toward the ground, unable to maintain altitude. The Vorn commander's voice broke through on all communication channels, panicked and confused. What are you doing? This defies all known physics. Walker grabbed the radio. Not your physics. Ours. The gravity fluctuations lasted only 3 minutes, but that was enough. When stability returned, over 80% of the remaining Vorn fleet had been destroyed or disabled. In his flagship, now crashed but intact in the Nevada desert, the Vorn commander stared out at the Earth sky with disbelief. These humans, these primitives with their simple weapons, had somehow defeated the most advanced military force in the known galaxy. A human aircraft approached the crashed flagship. The commander recognized Captain Walker stepping out, walking confidently toward the wreckage. The time for mockery was over. The time for surrender had begun. Walker approached the crashed Vorn flagship with a small team of soldiers. The massive ship had carved a half-mile-long scar in the Nevada desert. Parts still smoked and sparked. Unlike the destroyed vessels, this one remained mostly intact. The main hatch opened as they approached. Walker raised his hand, signaling his team to stop and be ready. From the dark opening, the Vorn commander emerged, flanked by 2 guards. He was larger than Ambassador Gray, with darker skin and elaborate markings on his face. You are Captain Walker, the commander said. It wasn't a question. Walker nodded. And you are? Commander Trell of the Vorn Collective Fleet. The alien's voice was stiff with pride, even in defeat. I wish to discuss terms of ceasefire. Walker noted he didn't say surrender. Your ships are destroyed or disabled. Your position is lost. What terms do you think you can offer? Trell's four hands made a complex gesture. Do not mistake tactical defeat for surrender, human. The collective has thousands more ships. This was merely an exploratory force. One of Walker's soldiers whispered, "He's bluffing," but Walker wasn't so sure. "If you had thousands more ships, why not send them?" Walker asked. "Because we did not believe they would be necessary for a primitive world," Trell admitted, his large black eyes narrowing. "A mistake we will not make again." Back at Earth Command, General Mills and world leaders viewed the conversation through Walker's body camera. The situation remained tense despite the victory. "We cannot sustain another attack," Mills said privately to the president. "Reed's gravity device damaged our own systems too. Most of our rail guns are offline. We need time." The president nodded. "Then we need to bluff too." Walker received new orders through his earpiece. He smiled slightly at the words. "Commander Trell," Walker said, "we're preparing to show you something. A demonstration of why further attacks would be unwise." Walker gave a signal, and far above them, something happened that made the Vorn commander look up in shock. Three of Earth's orbital platforms, previously hidden from Vorn scans, decloaked simultaneously. They weren't weapon platforms. They were manufacturing facilities, built in secret years before the Vorn arrived as part of a space mining initiative. But Trell didn't know that. "Those are drone factories," Walker lied smoothly. "We've been mass-producing autonomous attack drones designed specifically to target Vorn weaknesses." As if on cue, thousands of small objects launched from the platforms. They were actually mining drones reprogrammed by Reed, but they moved with military precision, forming threatening patterns in the sky. Each drone carries an electromagnetic pulse generator, a sonic disruptor, and a kinetic penetrator, Walker continued. "And we've just finished production on 10,000 of them." Trell watched the sky display with growing alarm. "Impossible. Your technology level is exactly what we wanted you to believe," Walker interrupted. "We've been monitoring alien communications for decades. We knew someone would come eventually, and we prepared." It was a masterful lie. Earth had done no such thing. But the evidence seemed to support Walker's claim. The disabled Vorn ships, the orbital platforms, the swarming drones. Trell conferred with his officers in their language, clearly disturbed by this development. Finally, he turned back to Walker. "What are your terms?" "Immediate withdrawal of all Vorn forces from our solar system. Return of any Earth prisoners or samples. A non-aggression treaty." "And what do we receive in exchange?" Trell asked. Walker smiled thinly. "You get to leave with your flagship and remaining forces intact, rather than being destroyed by our drone swarm. And we don't share our anti-Vorn technology with other species you've been protecting." That last threat seemed to hit home. Trell stood straighter. "The collective will consider your terms," he said stiffly. As the commander returned to his ship to communicate with his superiors, Walker's team relaxed slightly. One soldier whispered, "Do you think they bought it?" Walker kept his eyes on the damaged flagship. "They're arrogant but not stupid. They know they underestimated us once. They won't risk doing it again." Behind Walker, the drone swarm continued its impressive but ultimately harmless display. Earth's greatest weapon, it turned out, wasn't technology at all. It was the power of misdirection. 3 days passed. The Vorn flagship remained grounded in the Nevada desert, surrounded by military forces. Around the world, crashed alien ships were being studied by eager scientists. Dr. Reed hadn't slept, working nonstop to understand the technology they'd captured. Walker entered the temporary command center set up near the Vorn flagship. General Mills and several world leaders waited inside, tension evident on their faces. "They've made their decision," Mills said. "Commander Trell requests a formal meeting." The meeting was set in neutral territory, a large tent halfway between the human forces and the Vorn ship. Walker arrived first, accompanied by Mills, the president, and other key leaders. Reed came too, looking exhausted but excited. Commander Trell arrived with Ambassador Gray and 3 other Vorn officials. They sat across from the humans at a simple table. "The collective has considered your terms," Trell began, his voice formal. "We agree to withdraw from your solar system." A wave of carefully hidden relief passed through the human delegation. Their bluff had worked. However, Trell continued, "We require assurances that your drone weapons will not be used against us during our withdrawal." Walker nodded. "Agreed, provided your withdrawal is complete and immediate." The formal treaty took only 30 minutes to draft and sign. The Vorn, despite their advanced technology, respected strength. They had miscalculated Earth's capabilities and paid the price. As the meeting concluded, Ambassador Gray approached Walker privately. "You surprised us, Captain," Gray said, his earlier arrogance gone. "No species has ever repelled a Vorn exploration force." Walker kept his face neutral. "Perhaps you should stop underestimating primitive species." Gray made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Indeed, though I remain curious. How did humans develop such effective countermeasures so quickly?" Walker smiled. "We've been fighting ourselves for thousands of years, Ambassador. We got very good at finding weaknesses and exploiting them." The Vorn departure began the next day. The remaining ships, repaired enough to fly, lifted off from various crash sites around the world. The flagship was the last to leave, rising slowly from the desert, still bearing scars from its fall. Walker watched from the command center as the alien fleet assembled in orbit, then disappeared in flashes of light, jumping to whatever system they called home. "Do you think they'll come back?" Mills asked, standing beside him. "Eventually," Walker said. "But next time, they'll come as equals, not conquerors." In the weeks that followed, Earth began to rebuild. The knowledge gained from the Vorn ships accelerated human technology by decades. Reed and his team reverse-engineered alien power systems, shield technology, and propulsion methods. 1 month after the Vorn departure, Walker visited Reed's lab. The scientist was examining a component from a Vorn engine. "Making progress?" Walker asked. Reed looked up with a grin. "More than you can imagine. Their technology isn't actually that complex once you understand the principles. Some of it we could have developed ourselves if we'd looked at problems differently. That's what saved us in the end," Walker said, "looking at problems differently." Reed nodded. The Vorn built their entire defense around stopping energy weapons because that's all they've faced for centuries. They forgot the basics. "Never underestimate a simple rock thrown at high speed," Walker said with a smile. 6 months later, the first human ship using modified Vorn technology launched from Earth. Walker commanded it, with Reed as his science officer. Their mission: to explore nearby star systems and establish Earth's presence in the galaxy. As the ship accelerated past Mars, Reed joined Walker on the bridge. "Do you think we'll meet other aliens out there?" Reed asked, looking at the stars ahead. "Definitely," Walker replied. "And thanks to the Vorn, they'll treat us with respect from the start." The ship engaged its jump drive, disappearing in a flash of light. Earth was no longer alone in the universe, no longer primitive or defenseless. The species that had once been mocked now stood ready to take its place among the stars, simple weapons and all.